No.
Nope, that's not in the picture.
I'm kidding.
Don't focus on my belly, and I'm not kidding.
Yeah, well,
Okay, should we start?
Yeah, go ahead.
What's your name?
Nancy Welty Clark,
Okay. What was your address during the war?
803 South Fairview Avenue in Park Ridge.
Can you tell us a little bit about your parents and brothers and sisters while living through the war?
My father was an architect and also an insurance salesman, but during the war he went to work for Douglas Aircraft that we used to be at O'Hare, and drawing airplane designs for templates and things like that. My mother had worked for Moheisers, and she went into business for herself and was helping people redecorate and fix up their houses. I have a sister 2 years younger than I am, and brothers 4 and 5 years younger. We all went to Roosevelt and Lincoln and Maine East. I was heavily into anything that was mathematical, scientific or musical, and I was in what they called the water ballet. When my sister started 2 years later, she was so good at water ballet that I dropped out because I didn't want to be in a competitive environment. And let's see, what else do you want to know about that?
What class were you in?
What class?
Yeah, what class year were you in?
1946.
The class of 46. Okay.
My freshman year, I hated study halls. Absolutely detested study halls. So one of the things, several of us, other of us who detested study halls, said maybe we can get, was Mr. Harley at the time, to teach a music appreciation class during the study hall time. So we did that, and we quickly discovered that Mr. Harley was terribly boring. So then we asked him if we could learn about instruments. So he lined us up and said, what instrument? And he had us hold out his hands. I held these out, and he says, bass fiddle. Because these are big. And so we started our own little group instead of a study hall. Pretty soon we were in the concert orchestra and the concert band. And Maine Township had one of the best concert bands in the country those couple years. They were not under Mr. Harley. It was Mr. Serig. He was wonderful. He taught really well. He did little tricks, like you'd be in the middle of conducting, and if you didn't stop right on there, you were playing by yourself. Yeah. And he would swap instruments with anybody in the band if he felt somebody was not paying too much attention. He'd say, okay, you conduct, I'll play your instrument. And he'd go play their instrument and do it badly on purpose, so that to annoy them, you know. And it was funny, and it served the purpose. And he also taught ear training, harmony. I mean, these were after school. They weren't school projects, but after school we'd stay and do things like that. But because I was good at music, I auditioned for the Chicago Symphony when I was 15, which was positively ridiculous. But the conductor of the Chicago Symphony first had me supposed to play part of Rimsky-Korsakov's Russian Easter Overture. And I just looked at him like he was crazy, you know. Put my hands down. There was no way in the world. That Russian Easter Overture is in 5/1 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. I couldn't count that fast. So he said, well, I don't think you're ready. I said, okay. He says, wait a minute, just a minute. And he puts up Franck's D minor symphony, which I absolutely love. And I could play that. So then he said, well, you're not ready to be in the orchestra. You should come back in a year or two. But in the meantime, why don't you sit on rehearsals, if you want to. So that night I joined the union and started in on a rehearsal. And after the rehearsal, they said, this is the schedule of the concerts and the rehearsals. And any time that we need a substitute, you can play as a substitute. I didn't miss an evening or a weekend concert for 2 years because somebody always had a better job. It didn't pay well. They paid $3 for a rehearsal and $13 for a concert. And you had to go back and forth to get there, you know, it ate it all up. So if they could get a
A gig.
gig, yeah, for a wedding or something like that, they took it and called me. And then somewhere along the line, somebody wanted to know if I'd play for the USO. So the USO was a little farther south on Michigan Avenue than Orchestra Hall, but in that same general area.
What was the building? Do you remember?
No,
Okay.
I know it was ground floor and it was not very big, but I would, with my bass fiddle that I borrowed from somebody at Maine, I would get the bus from Maine Township High School to the middle of Park Ridge, walk to Edison Park, take the Edison Park bus to Jefferson Park, the streetcar to Michigan Avenue, to Madison Avenue, and then walk to the USO with this bass fiddle. And then of course I did that to Orchestra Hall too. And afterwards you'd reverse the whole thing. And when you got home, Park Ridge had rolled up the sidewalks and turned off all the lights. There was nothing. It was, I mean, you can't imagine, unless you've been in a cave, how dark it was in Park Ridge. Because that's before all the glow from the city lighted you up all night.
So tell us about, how old were you? You were 16 at this time?
15.
15.
And they
you
were a little hyper about that.
So tell us about what was it like actually doing the concerts, and what were the soldiers and sailors like, and did you talk to any of them, that kind of stuff?
Actually, we got very little chance to talk to anybody except to answer their requests. They'd come up and say, we want to hear Sioux City Sue, or Doing What Comes Naturally. That was their two favorites. Or Coming In on a Wing and a Prayer. You know, those were over and over again. And another one called The Gypsy that I hated, but Sioux City Sue and Doing What Comes Naturally were fun.
And they were all they were dancing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were pretty much on a small stage, a step up and a little bit away from where they were dancing. So we didn't really get much communication. And by the time we'd cleaned up at night, they'd all left, so you know, there wasn't much communication except one man who wanted to communicate, who asked for, I don't remember how he got yes I do. His father had my name, and so he called my parents and asked if it would be okay for him to come out and meet me. And I dated him for several years. But he was Air Force photographer. And I have in the front hallway a collection of pictures that he sent back, war-scene pictures. Some of them are really neat. Old cathedrals bombed out, you know, just weird. Anyhow, I did that.
What
Till
branch was he in?
What?
Branch of the service was he in?
Air Force.
Air Force. Okay.
Yeah, he was a photographer, so he went different places and sometimes took them from the air, but usually he took them from the ground, different places they went. I guess taking pictures from the air didn't work all that well. But that was one of the things in the fact that go back to high school, the water ballet was my main after-school activity. And they'd call it synchronized swimming or something like that now. But we would swim in these atrocious swimming suits. I mean, you didn't want to be caught dead in these things, and that was about the way we all felt about them. They were wool, and they stretched so much when they got wet that we'd sit there and tie knots all over them, literally to make them fit, more or less fit. And then, of course, for the actual shows, we got to wear something else. But in the classes and in the rehearsals, we had to wear these horrible wooden things that the school handed out. And the guys got it better. They got to go swimming nude. We had.
And was this the pool at the school, at Maine High School?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a pretty nice pool. Good sized pool, good diving board. What I remember is the rafters, the ceiling rafters were not all that high. So one of the challenges was to spring the ceiling board, put paint on your fingers, put your fingerprints on the rafter before you went over, which kind of threw you off balance. Really hard to go do a good dive when you're trying to put your fingers on the ceiling. But it was fun. Had a good swimming coach. Thought I'd remember her name, but I don't. But one of the things I did in high school, and that was kind of unique to me as far as I know, I traded with other people for gym things because I was an absolute disaster in most of the other things. So I'd trade with somebody so that I didn't have to go to basketball or field hockey or something else, and I could always go swimming. And because a lot of girls wanted their hair to look nice, somebody'd always trade with me. So and of course the swimming coach never gave me away because she was glad that somebody wanted to come. And so she used me as assistant teacher. Every once in a while she'd forget that I couldn't float, and would say get in and demonstrate the dead bed float. I'd get in and I'd go like this and go straight to the bottom. And everybody start laughing. I knew it was going to happen, so oh, I forgot. You don't float. So after that class, we'd go out to a bus shelter. I think there's still one there on Potter Road, and wait for a bus. But after the swimming thing, frequently we'd miss the last one. So we ended up walking from Maine East home several nights a week,
Wow.
even in miserable weather. And we weren't above sticking our thumbs out. And as far as I know, nobody got any trouble for sticking their thumbs
So
out. But
how common was hitchhiking back then?
pretty common. Not all that frowned upon. We went lots of places by sticking our thumbs out.
Did your parents pick up hitchhikers?
Yeah. And after I got my driver's license, I picked up hitchhikers. So, somehow or other it's gotten to be a thing not to do, but this is way aside, but I was in the ski area in Colorado, and I was going up a 2-lane road, and another guy was coming down the 2-lane road with the mountain going up on one side and the cliff going down on the other side. When he lost control, went across the center line and took off the whole left side of my car. And I stopped at the ranger station and said, "Can I park my car here and sleep in it overnight because I'm too shook to drive?" And they opened up a little cabinet there. It was fine. It was really nice. The next day I was on my way somewhere and the snow got really bad, so I pulled to one of the ski lodges. This was summer. It wasn't the middle of winter. It wasn't open because it wasn't ski time yet, and knocked on the door and said, even in the summer they have occasional snowstorms in the high altitudes. And she said, "Yes, I'll open a cabin for you." The next morning, it was still snowing really hard. I didn't want to go anyplace, so I said, "What can you do here?" So she said, "Well, I've got a gold mine behind." I said, "Oh boy." She says, "You can't go in the gold mine, but you can search the slag pile." So I try to go to where the thing is to search the slag pile, and there's a landslide. And the landslide comes down across the road, so we're just butted right into the edge of this landslide. And it's a really narrow mining road. I mean, it's just barely wider than the car. And I couldn't really see very well. So I thought, I'll open the passenger door, which was the downhill side, so I can see how much edge I've got. I reach across, open that thing. The wind takes the car door off its hinges and slams it into the front of the car. So now I have a car that's disaster on both sides. But I've got a rope along, so I pick up the door and rope it back onto the car, go back down, and by this time the snow has quit and things are okay, and I go on my way. And pretty soon I'm not thinking about it, but here's this kid with his thumb out. And I stop. And then once I stopped, I said, how is he going to get in the car? Because it was a two-door car with both sides. So this kid climbs in the window, and we go on our way. But, you know, that was just the sort of thing that you did. This is a fairly young kid out there with his thumb out in an area that was not high traffic at all. And then another thing we did out there that was fun was in Roosevelt National Forest. You could go through some of the forest that's not public on a half-track, on an Army half-track. That was fun too. Very rough. I mean, if you were bruisable, you got bruised, because there weren't any padded seats. This is for troop transport. So you're just all piled in the back of this thing, and when you went downhill, everybody went to the front. When you went uphill, everybody. And somebody had a little kid, so everybody's trying to make kind of a circle around the woman who has this little kid, so they don't slam into her. Anyway, that was another fun thing. I'm way off the subject. So we get back on it?
That's okay. So we were talking about hitchhiking and getting around. Would you circle back on the parents and stuff in the neighborhood?
Okay, so you were saying that you had done a lot of the activities with math, science, and music, as you said. Did you have some friends that did similar things?
Unfortunately, as one of the geeks, I didn't have very many close friends. I was off doing things because I decided to do them and not worry about other people. And I discovered the hard way that I didn't get other people to join me. I tried a few times. I'd say when we're in a group, I'm going to go do such and such, come on. And nobody would come. You know, so I had some friends. Turns out now when I go back to them, they think we were good friends. Well, you know, and I'm willing to go along with that, although that isn't the way I remembered it. But I was into lots of things, but I was not part of a group, clique, or whatever you call it. In the closest came in the band. In the band we had a few people who would kind of group. That band went everywhere. Every place there was a concert, we'd pile in buses and go.
So what kind was it? Was it the main high school band?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were excellent. We were invited to contests in Wisconsin, all over the place. We'd pile in.
Was this the marching band or?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the marching band at Maine East at that time was a concert band. The only thing that happened when it was a marching band is a few people had to change instruments. Because you can't play bass fiddle in a marching band.
Sure.
And timpani is hard. You know, and those were the two instruments that I played in the concert band. And so in the marching band I played cymbals. Because you still want to be part of things. And Mr. Serig for 2 years tried to get me a glockenspiel because he thought that would be neat, but he never did. They didn't have a whole-
Glockenspiel? What is a glockenspiel?
It's kind of like a small xylophone, but it's on a frame that's raised up in the air, so you whap it. Kind of nice, would have been fun.
Okay.
So, and then my senior year, I was offered so many scholarships that I was overwhelmed. Juilliard, Oberlin, Northwestern, Eastman, Knox. I mean, I was deluged with scholarships that terrified me. I was pretty much a loner and a homebody and pretty timid. Very, in spite of the fact that I did all sorts of crazy things that nobody else did, I was pretty shy. So the idea of going to New York to go to college was just completely overwhelming. I went and visited Knox, and I didn't like the fact that half the kids were drunk. I visited Oberlin and didn't like the religious atmosphere there, which I probably was exaggerating because as a high school student, I was pretty sensitive to that kind of stuff. I didn't want to go to Northwestern because they wanted me to be a non-resident. And I figured I was shy enough and inhibited enough that being a non-resident was going to make things worse. So I ran away from home. And I joined a traveling dance band. Played with it for a little while, and it was awful.
What is a traveling dance band? You played it at dances, or
They typically played at resorts.
Okay.
So they play, we were mostly in Michigan. We'd play at a summer resort for a week, and then we'd go to a different resort for a week. And I don't know why or how they managed it. That was not my part of the things,
Sure.
but it was terrible. It was an awful way to live. So after 3 weeks, the same boyfriend that I'm talking about came up to visit, and he kind of said, "Oh, let's go home." You know?
Sure.
So he took me back. I got back home, and my mother said, "You're not quitting. You signed up for this. You are behaving like a mature adult. You're going to go back and give them 2 weeks' notice." So I did that. And then I got back just in time for graduation, and I felt, this is weird. And Miss Parolini, the English teacher class, and she says, "You know, you've missed enough class that I'm going to have to give you a B. I can't give you an A." And I thought, my goodness, I'd be happy to get a C from her. She was really, really stiff.
So
I can tell lots of tales about her, but
Just getting back to, we want to
Yeah.
get back to, there's some other parts about.
you're going to have to keep pulling me
That's
back.
fine. So when the war started, your dad started working for the Douglas Aircraft.
Yeah.
So we were coming off of, some hard times. Talk about your family. Go ahead.
Alright, so when the war started, the Depression had just finished, how was your family like dealing with the change? Like how had it changed for you?
What was like the economic situation before the war in your family?
My mother was a terrible workaholic. So she was, as soon as I was 11, Mother went back to work. She was working part-time before then, but when I was 11, she went back to work, and the house was my problem. I cooked, did the laundry, and all that kind of stuff, because she was working for Moheisers.
Tell us about what is Moheisers.
Okay, there still is a little shop on Prospect, just about half a block this side of the train tracks. There still is a shop there. Moheisers was a kind of a gift, dry goods, clothing, kind of like you took a Kmart and shrunk it down to a little shop. It had all sorts of stuff. And in the basement they had the yard goods and the decorating shop where my mother worked. And after a while, when my mother decided that this was ridiculous, that Moheisers was making most of the money and she was doing most of the work, she brought things home. And the dining room was the yard goods section. The living room was the cutting section. The banisters were the intermediate. All our beds were full of things that were half done. When you wanted to go to bed at night, you had to find some place to unload somebody's drapes or a slipcover to, so you could climb in bed. And he said my father was also helping with that some and working at Douglas and selling insurance and occasionally doing some landscaping depending on what was available. Luckily, if you know Lake Villa area, almost at the Wisconsin border, it had people living there who were affluent enough not to be terribly affected. Like the Peacocks from Peacock Jewelry, Hawthorne's, Hawthorne Melody Farms, Johnson Wax, you know, a bunch of big people. And their estates tended to be things like 16 acres. They'd have their own dog kennel, a little bit of a golf course, swimming pool, everything. They hired my father. And he hired me. And we would go up there on weekends with the transit and everything and lay things out, decide where to plant trees and where to clear. And
So your dad was a landscape architect.
yes, predominantly. He could do other, but what he liked was landscape. And he taught landscape architecture at the University of Iowa after he graduated from the University of Illinois. That is after he was in the World War I. In World War I, he was a second lieutenant, and my father was a complete pacifist. I mean, the worst thing I ever heard him say was "confounded," and he didn't say that really loud. And he kept a diary when he was in the Army, which I have upstairs. And it amazed me in my old age when I got the guts to read his diary to learn that he taught bayonet. For somebody who's that much of a pacifist, it seems so contradictory. But I'm sure they were just spearing straw piles and things like that, dummies, and horsemanship. And he also was the decoder for secret messages for President Theodore Roosevelt. So his diary is pretty interesting. Really hard to read, but pretty interesting. So I'm way off the subject again.
Oh, okay, we could swing back. So when World War II started, what do you remember about like, the start of the war? And was there like big reaction in your family and such?
No, there was not. It was just another thing happening. Nobody got excited about it. We changed a few things about the way we lived, but nothing really seemed to impinge our life very much. I mean, you couldn't get sugar to canned stuff. You had to retread your tires because you couldn't buy new tires. There was gas rationing. You saved things that you'd think are ridiculous now, like toothpaste tubes and aluminum foil and rubber bands were, part of what they recycled and was big deals.
And you save, why would you save toothpaste tubes? Were they made out of metal?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were, I think, zinc or something. I think they were zinc. So we had an agreement. My mother's from a farm in Indiana. On weekends, we would go down to the farm once in a while, maybe once every 2 months, and we'd take our sugar coupons with us, and we'd trade them for gas coupons. Because if we were going to get back and forth, we didn't have enough gas to get back and forth, and we could get along without sugar. So my mother was never a big sugar user anyway when she was cooking, so that wasn't a big deal as far as we were concerned. But it was really quite a ways into the war before it started sinking in, at least to our family. I mean, there were things like my father going to work at Douglas, but it was really toward the end of the war that it started sinking in for me when I graduated from Marquette and went to work for General Electric Aircraft gas turbines and started working on the design of the F-86D fighter plane. And at that point, things did get pretty important to me. But up until then, it was just kind of, you went on your way, and that was way over there, it wasn't here. It may be not a very good way to feel, but that's what we did feel. Or me at least. And I don't remember anybody else getting all that excited for the war unless they were about to be drafted. I mean, then they got interested. But the kids that were too young to be drafted weren't paying any attention. And the girls weren't paying much attention. Except that a lot of the girls thought dating somebody who was in the Army or Navy was pretty neat, but that was about the extent of our lack of interest.
Do you remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed? Do you remember where you were or
No, I
anything
don't
like
remember.
that?
I've got a really good memory, but some things just aren't there at all. And that's one that's not there at all. I mean, if people say you just remember when Kennedy was shot. I don't know where I was. I remember hearing about it, but I don't remember where I was. Here's Hiroshima. I don't remember where I was. You know, all these important things that were during my lifetime and I knew about. Now, September 11th, I know exactly where I was. In Resurrection Hospital coming out of a coma. Thinking that the world has come to an end because all around me were televisions with all this stuff happening and I was just opening my eyes from being in a coma. And I'm begging the nurses to turn the televisions off. And they won't. And I realized later why they wouldn't, but at the time I thought they were just being inconsiderate. And I didn't realize it was real. I thought H.G. Wells had written another one. So,
Was there anyone like in your family or in your extended family that went into the war or was drafted?
yes, the older of my two brothers was drafted. Actually, he enlisted. He was not drafted. He was 4F, but you could enlist anyway. It limited what they did with you, but you could enlist anyway. He ended up being a coach for the Army football team. And teaching part-time in some of the schools, the Army schools. So he never actually was in the war. And I don't know a hell of a lot what he did do, but we thought it was pretty funny.
It is.
I think he thought it was pretty neat, truthfully.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the aircraft that you worked on when you graduated, after you graduated from Marquette?
Sure. I'm going to start a little before it. I went the first 2 years at Rosary, that's now Dominican, and then after a 6 months off, kind of misadventure, I will skip at the moment, I went to Marquette. And an interviewer who was coming to try to hire female mathematicians went to Rosary to interview, and they didn't have anybody to suggest, so they sent him up to me in Marquette. And that's how I got the job at General Electric.
Now, if we could hold it, I'd like to go further as in the second part,
Okay.
because we want to go up till
Right.
1945.
Got it.
Okay.
That's a very good story. So you were talking about you rationing of gasoline and food. Did you notice any food changing or? And how did you feel like you were doing all the cooking and cleaning, and your mom was like, how did you feel about doing that?
I felt kind of a poor little me thing, you know, that I shouldn't have to do all that I should be allowed to do some of the things that kids just did. I shouldn't have had to come home from school and cook. If I wasn't going downtown to play in the USO, I had to be home cooking.
So you had to cook and you had to and get down to the USO?
Well, I couldn't do both at the same night.
Okay.
But any night I was not going down there, I don't know what happened the other nights. It would be pick-up meals. But one of the things that really bothered me was on Saturday morning, my mother would make a list of the things that I had to do before I could do any of my own stuff. And I'd pitch in and I'd try to get down that list, you know, checking the things off that list. And I kept thinking if I got to the bottom of the list, I could do something I wanted to do. But my mother kept putting things below it. And I never got, in 2 years, I never got to the bottom of the list. So I never got to do anything on a weekend that I wanted to do. I always had to do sewing, laundry, cooking, cleaning, all sorts of stuff. My sister got away without doing it. She was just nasty and stubborn. Do you remember my sister's temper? She'd just tell my mother, I don't have to do anything but die. So, and rather than fight with her, they'd let her get away with it. And I never got that ability to get that hostile or stubborn. So,
So as far as food, you guys you mentioned you swapped sugar coupons for
gasoline.
gas. Did you have a victory garden, or did you have to do anything different did you ever suffer for lack of food, or did you guys do anything different for food?
Well, of course, that was one of the things that helped going back and forth to the farm.
You got food?
Because
could
we
bring
get-
it back. Okay.
Typically only two things, eggs and chicken. There. That was the deal. And it was nice, there was a White Castle on the way. And we'd fill up at the White Castle on the way there and on the way back. And that was a big treat. It was about 10 cents, I think. And they were good. Not much change from how they are now. Here, I don't remember. I was kind of brought up to cope with whatever was around, and I don't remember it being any serious problem for us as far as having stuff to eat. Pretty plain stuff, and because I was cooking, there was maybe about 5 different dinners that I alternated. A meatloaf, a Swiss steak, chicken, macaroni and cheese, those kind of dinners. And they always were the same: carrots and onions and potatoes and maybe a dressing for the chicken, but they were simple dinners. And we generally had enough to make the desserts we wanted to make. So I got good at devil's food cake, cherry pie, lemon chiffon.
Doesn't sound like you're suffering too much.
No, we weren't suffering too much. We were doing okay. And when we went to the farm, they were short of sugar, but if we gave them the sugar, then they could can things, and then sometimes we brought canned stuff back. Oh, and that was one thing that really was one of the reasons we were not in trouble, was one of my aunts canned beef. And her canned beef was so good that you might prefer it to the average thing you get now in a restaurant. It was just, and you don't think of beef as something you can,
Right.
but it was really good. And they had grapevines, and sometimes we'd, depending on the time of the year, we might pick grapes to bring home. But that wasn't a big deal because there was grapes around here growing over a lot of the fences along the alley. Had grapes growing on them. And there was rhubarb all over the place. Apples. So, as far as fruit goes. And there's another thing. I haven't seen any kid that eats it now. But we used to eat what we called sour grass, which is an oxalis. It's a weed. Tastes really good. It still grows around here and it still tastes really good. And I pull it and eat it, but when I tell anybody else I'm eating it, they say, oh, that's a weed. Oh well, so what? Dandelions are edible too. A lot of things are edible and a few are toxic.
So back during that time when you were a student, do you remember anything different as far as the environment, as far as besides your own rationing or things like that in your own house? Or how did the high school, what noticeable things were different in high school and in the community because of the war? Is there anything that sticks out that you remember?
Yeah, we had these, I can't think what they called them, but they'd have these meetings where anybody would volunteer to help in emergencies, and you'd learn first aid
Civil
and
defense?
all that kind of stuff. And I was too young, but I was big, so they never noticed until there was a blood drive, and I had to sign something with my date of birth. Excuse me. And they kicked me out when they discovered I was not 16 yet. But that was one of the things that happened. And then blackouts sometimes. And of course, most of us did not have any blackout drapes or anything like that. So you just turned everything off. And sometimes if things were marginal, you know, it's kind of halfway a blackout, we would play cards by flashlight. Because we didn't have any television. And I think we probably did have a radio, but Lone Ranger and Cisco Kid and things like that.
So when you had these how often did you have these blackouts?
Oh, there was a period in which they may have been once a month or so.
Okay.
But not, it wasn't regular. It would just kind of happen. And I don't remember whether it was fire siren or what that indicated, but there was some sort of a noise signal. And then there was another when you could turn things back on. Actually, my memory is that ordinarily you couldn't turn anything back on until the next morning. You know, they never declared it off.
Okay.
But the next morning you would assume it was off. And but people did more do-it-yourselfing. That was kind of neat, because I liked do-it-yourselfing.
Like what kinds of other things did you see? Did people do or did you guys do?
Well, one thing we did was we built tool sheds. Repaired things that you might not have repaired now without calling somebody. We do electrical plumbing. We did all sorts of crazy things that now you'd say you'd have to have somebody licensed and approved to do. And every once in a while I get concerned that there might be something still in this house that I did back then that might not be up to code, like this room. Yeah. You know. But we had a victory garden, but our victory garden, this particular house victory garden, was not very successful because we had too many tall trees.
All right.
We did we got green beans to grow reasonably well, but that was about the only thing that seemed to like our backyard. And but we had crab apples, and they're okay. We had choke cherries. People nowadays don't eat choke cherry either. There's a bush in the front, right next to the fence. Has choke cherries in the spring. A couple hundred kids walk by there. Nobody picks a choke cherry and eats it. It's amazing. I even go out there and say, you can pick them if you want to, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And they taste good if you're into this kind of tart, you know. They're not very sweet cherries, but...
So let me bring you back. So
Okay. So going back to your like high school experience with the war, and Maine high school had some assemblies when student soldiers were killed or in battle. Do you remember anything about that or?
No, I don't. I don't remember it at all. I don't know whether that was because after I got out may have been most of it, but
Matt, you can answer. Go
Yes.
ahead, Matt.
Okay. Other than that victory garden and the civil defense work that you did you do any other volunteer things?
yeah, well, I volunteered as an assistant in the fire department, which didn't do much except get you a little education. And
Nancy, where was that located?
the fire department was on the Northwest Highway, where there's now all this new not modern stuff, about halfway between the Tui intersection and that next light.
Summit Avenue? Or
Yeah, about
Okay.
halfway between.
Okay.
It was on the Northwest Highway. It was a fairly small brick building. Had a pole. I thought that was neat. I always wished we could go up and slide back down the pole, but they
Sure.
never told us we could do that. But they really did.
Was there a Dalmatian? A
I
dog?
didn't no. Nice thought, but no.
You want to do the next question?
Oh, so you told us that you kind of jumped between a lot of friend groups and not a lot of people were really doing the same exact thing you were.
Right.
Did you do any dating in high school? Or you seem pretty busy, so
Did I do any
dating,
dating?
school dances.
Really only this one photographer. And I quick discovered he was a complete dud at school events. I was a really good dancer, and he didn't know how to dance. And I wasn't succeeding in teaching him well enough, so, he was... Well, that was one thing that at Lincoln, if you wanted to, 2 days a week, they had a teacher come in and teach dance at lunch hour. He happened to be also the general science teacher, but he was excellent dance teacher. Except there was a rule, nobody sits out unless there's an odd number. Everybody is on the dance floor.
So did people? I mean, like, I've just got an impression that kids back then danced a lot in general. When did you get a chance to dance? Like, you did dance lessons. Did you? I mean, like, how? Where else did you dance, or or?
Well, if you were crazy like me, waiting for the bus, in a restaurant, in the train station, if they weren't playing music, you whistled. It was just something you did if you wanted to.
Right.
We'd also sometimes sing in public. And we'd frequently do the things where they weren't rounds, but they were back and forth. One person sang a verse, the next person, so you went back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that was another thing, we had a group. It varied who came, but there was about 8 regular people
Mm-hmm.
in this group that got together in the evening and sang. And we'd do that. We theoretically did it 5 nights a week, but of course not everybody came 5 nights a week.
Sure, but almost every night, huh?
Yeah, almost every night. And it was kind of a 9 to 9:45 thing. After you finished doing your homework, we'd gather and we'd sing and relax and enjoy and then go home and go to bed. That was kind of the routine for a while. Didn't last a real long time, but for a while we had a few people. There was another girl and I who were always there, and a few other, probably 20 other people who were off and on, making a total of maybe 8 of us at any particular night.
Wow.
And there was somewhere between 20 and 50 songs we sang.
What was like your favorite songs you would sing?
I gotta say something else weird about this. We sang in Latin. Salve Regina Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. That kind of stuff.
Right.
And I can still do a few of them, but that's the only one I can really do all the way through.
Okay.
We kind of got a thing about that Latin group. Was part of why it probably sprang up. Was Latin was not fun, but it was kind of fun to sing. So the people interested in Latin made up a bit of the group.
Now I'm going to digress a little bit. So, these are 3 very bright kids, and they do very well in school. And they take a lot of high-level math and everything.
Yeah.
Right, Andrew? Do you take? I think both of you guys are. I know great stuff. So you did very well in high school. In
Yes.
math, like what kind of math they teach you in high school, or that you
Okay.
achieved since you did very well? Did you and did you do it on your own too, or
They had good math classes, algebra, plane geometry, solid geometry, solid trig, and there's an advanced algebra classes. They were all well taught at the time.
Did they teach you any calculus?
No,
Okay.
waited till I got in college for that one.
Okay.
Although, because my boyfriend knew calculus, and we do homework together, I did learn calculus in high school, but not from school.
Okay.
From
Was
him.
this the Air Force
Yeah,
guy? Okay.
yeah. And when he was on leave, he went to IIT and took some of these vector analysis and all that kind of stuff classes, and we do our homework together. So we had kind of weird dates. We either did homework together or we went to concerts. Once in a while we did something else. Usually it was a disaster. Like one day we decided to go swimming. We were going to go to Ravinia for a concert. So we decided before the concert we'd bring a picnic and we'd go swimming in Lake Michigan. I didn't know he couldn't swim. And there was a dune out a ways, so I was swimming back and forth the dune and back just to get some exercise. And I did it about 4 times and went back to get a drink or something like that. He says, "Well, I'm going to go with you." He gets halfway and goes under. And my guardian angel tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Turn around." And I went back, and I had taken life, that was another thing that was, most of the kids did take life-saving classes. Went back around, got to him and punched him in the stomach like they told you to. Pulled him around, and I was struggling because he was panicking. And the guy, lifeguard, finally rolled out and jumped off his little boat. And he says, "Are you in trouble?" I said, "If you get him, I'm not." But I was really tired. But I learned to be a little careful where I took Ellen.
Sure.
He was
Yeah. Why don't you go, Pete?
We gotta put the charger in.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You should pause it.